Meeting of the Emergency Services Efficiency Committee is called to order at 6:33. Second thing, seating of alternates. We need to seat one alternate for Tyler. I'll move to seat Stuart now.
Second.
I hear a motion in a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So Stuart is seated. Let me make a note of that. Is there anybody here present to speak tonight? Getting through to number 4. Approval of minutes from 9:25, which were filed.
I'll make a motion to accept those.
Motion to accept, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Tom. Any discussion? You said the densest information, amount of information I've seen in minutes in a long time, so I am heartily approving. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Oh, Bobby abstained, sorry.
Yeah, same.
And Mike, okay.
All right, last time, as part of the meeting, we had a call for solutions. Does anybody have a solution for anything?
I have a list of solutions.
Yeah, most of them are alcohol related. Let's go ahead, let's hear it.
On topic.
Oh, on topic solutions.
No, I just made a list of what I think the possibilities are, and then, if you're asking for solutions, some of them we may not even consider. I just thought a list of some possibilities, and maybe we can apply them to a SWOT and see if some work, some don't work.
Okay, let's start out with
Maybe,
number
maybe
one.
you don't like any of them.
Let's start out with number 1, Mike.
Just find where to put it. I know.
Would it be possible to write these out?
You're out there.
Anything is possible.
That's why we have, no.
Hey,
And if you, Mike,
Yes.
if you could shoot me an email with these too, so I can kind of
Yeah.
formalize them in my head as well as on here or share them.
All right, so these have no particular order, I'm not advocating for any of them, but for the sake of conversation, I thought it might be worth a try. So, one is, we changed nothing about the current configuration. Two is something we've already brought up, is separating a fire department and an ambulance service into 2 separate services.
How many you got, Mike? Just so I have room.
6.
I probably should have asked that.
We're a third of the way through already.
Good call.
Third one is a single combination fire and ambulance department, combination department with everything.
This is going to be loud on you for just a second here, and after that I apologize.
You're used to working third shift and having that startle you awake in the
Yes.
cruiser at night.
Yes, I am. It's not as bad as the Massachusetts with the takedown lights.
Or the air horn on the fire truck going by. You ready for number 4?
Yes.
I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay. This is sort of a creative change. It's similar to 3, but a little bit notable difference is 1 department with 2 separate divisions. And that would be divided between the paid and volunteer.
Still as one leadership though.
One department, right, with two divisions within the department. And I didn't really imagine exactly what that structure would look like, it's just a concept.
EMS within fire division?
No, this was paid versus volunteer, only because of the conversations about that potential conflict. Number 5, which was discussed a little bit last week. I did read the minutes from last week because I wasn't here, and I know there was discussion about the possibility of some sort of a paid administrator or an administrator to be the focal point of communication between the towns. So number 5 for me was a paid administrator. And I'm not sure what would fall below that, but just following that conversation. And then number 6 was a fire commission. There certainly may be more, that's just a list I made.
All right, those are Mike's 6. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that list?
Mike took my 3, so.
Okay.
Well, that's good.
That's a good thing.
You should have told me, I would have shared.
That's okay.
It's not
That's
that
all
I
right.
agree.
No, you're good.
What 3 did you have?
Mine was the single, or, so number 3, 6, and number 4.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
How about you?
So do we get extra credit for doing our homework?
You do. I'm gonna come up with a gold star for you, just you, Mike.
Yeah.
You get half a gold star. That's half it is.
You get a silver star.
Silver.
Silver, that's gold medal.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
That's right.
All right. I think that we've discussed some of these, and I think most of them need further conversation. I'm not sure where to start those conversations right now, but what I'd like to do is have each person ruminate on them for at least one meeting, and then we'll bring them up as separate topics and see what our pluses and minuses are, strengths and weaknesses.
Can we have a little bit of discussion on it?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean,
They're out here, so I think why we're here. Have some conversation.
we've kind of talked about all, like you said,
Yeah.
all of these in one form or another. Anyway, and everybody's had plenty of time to, like, ruminate, I think. I mean, not that just,
My opinion, I don't know.
Well, all right, let me fold in the next agenda item then, because I think that was my solution, is that I think that one of the things that all these accomplish that we could do relatively easily is to formalize the communication between the departments. As it is now, the departments, the conversation and the information flow ebbs and flows as department personnel ebb and flow. And there's no one person or two people, committee of 2, that you can go to and hold accountable for a lack of communication. And when nobody is accountable, when you don't have somebody accountable, nobody is accountable. You know, that's, you know, all you get is finger pointing.
Well, and I'll agree to disagree a little bit on that.
All right.
And on our end of it, for communication, if there is none, that's on me. It starts at the top,
Yeah.
and it has to start there. If I'm not the one communicating with Tom,
Right,
or
but,
if Tom's not around, whoever else is the next one in charge, that's bad on us.
Mhm.
And we need to be held responsible for that.
do you have a formal way of communicating? Like, do you meet once a month and say, listen, these are our issues?
No.
Because the other thing that I get from when in this topic is that I think that both you and Tom are true leaders, and leaders are worried about their mission and the men that are underneath them. And they're firefighters underneath them. Sorry,
Good save.
We get stars again.
There we go.
You said it first, you get gold one.
You both gave gold stars. All right. So it's the mission that you're trying to accomplish and the firefighters that are assigned to you. and making sure that the firefighters are trained and that they come out safe. All right? What you're not concerned about is what his firefighters are doing, because they're not your firefighters. They're not your mission. That's his mission. Well, all right. But you're not, when you think about your department, you're thinking about your department, not about the full town plan of what firefighting is.
On a day-to-day basis.
On a day-to-day basis.
Overall,
Right.
overall, I look at it as one big, as the big picture of who's coming, who's trained, who's gonna be able to be the most effective.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah, but you're not worried about planning his people's training. And he's not worried about planning your people's training.
But he is
You may in
hoping, but he is
in
hoping
the
that.
abstract, but you're not sitting down with a schedule saying, you are not personally sitting down and going, did Mike McCoo update his EMT training, his paramedic training?
Correct.
You know?
So, you're right, that I am not doing, but as far
We're
as.
not focusing on the huge picture as much as we're focusing on picture of what's happening. I mean, I know that it's a instinct to make sure that the people underneath you are taken care of.
I think this changed some, if I could insert into that concept. I think this changed some years ago when a lot of us at this table worked on building the plan where both departments responded together. That was a big hurdle to get
It's a
over.
big hurdle.
And I remember Stuart was at a lot of, probably every one of those meetings. And that was when the collective thought process got a little more collective.
Right.
That's when each department worried a little more about the interaction and do the pieces fit together between the departments, because we then were responding kind of as one group, even if we had different bosses for different parts of town. That was when we agreed that depending who gets there first, if they're chief officer, it doesn't matter what side of town they're on. They are in charge until the chief officer of the appropriate district gets there. Those were those hurdles we got over, and that's when we started thinking more of a group. I get what you're going for, but it's a little more
I'm
unified
looking
than
at-
you think.
And I'm looking at just even the little things. What kind of radios are we buying?
That's,
We're not talking to each
Good
other
example.
about that. We're not talking about which software package we're using to respond. We're not talking about that. Those are failures in communication where you can't call one person on the carpet and say, well, what the hell happened here? You know? Who's responsible for there being two different systems?
The two independent departments.
Yeah,
I
but,
mean, that's.
so you have two chiefs, but which one made the decision without the other one?
But again, in the current
They
situation,
can.
we are two different departments.
Right.
Like she said, think of it as this, like us and Tal.
Yeah.
We're not gonna sit there and agree with, like Tal, that, hey, you know, we're gonna buy the same radios.
Yeah.
Because we're two different departments.
I
And yes, we
understand
understand
that,
the big
but
picture.
we got two different financial sources between
Right, and the
us
current
and Tal.
situation is that there's two departments.
Right.
So, I mean, for the most part, I think that we communicate on a majority of the things that go on in town in terms of what portables do we buy? No.
And I think you're right. And what I want to do is go from majority to a unified picture, so that every time somebody's talking to somebody, and that there's somebody responsible for making that communication happen.
To do what you want, I think we have to look at Mike's list.
Mhm.
Can everybody
There's only
agree?
one way to
I
do it.
agree.
Can everybody agree?
And-
You're talking about stuff that'll never be fixed until you do structure.
Without a directive.
Structural change.
Right.
They may actually sit down and talk about what radios they get. They may,
Right.
at the end of the day, agree to disagree, and they each go and buy their own. Doesn't mean that they didn't communicate. It means that right now, the way that the system is set up, that they can then make their own independent choices. So I wouldn't say that they're not necessarily not communicating. There's no directive that says you have to make the same choice.
and let's just keep a point of reference too. The radios, even if we buy different brands, the radios all work together.
Yeah.
So
They don't work the
so-
same though.
Well, no, they don't work the
And-
same and they're
and
not
so
trained for the
we
same,
have
and that
to
needs to be fixed.
cross-train and-
But if we buy Motorola or Kenwood, depending on what the deal is at the time, that's less critical than the fact that they can communicate.
They can talk to each other.
Definitely could be better, I just, you know,
And
I want the
that goes
misunderstanding.
with everything, not just radios, I think.
Absolutely.
Right.
That if what he buys is working when we operate together, that's fine, you know, because they made their choice to do something, it's working for the town, it's working with us. It's not a huge problem, if it was, then,
I think
You know,
the things
I-
that aren't hindering the two departments providing service.
Right.
They may then just say, I hear what you're saying, and you find a benefit in that, and I find a benefit in this, and that's okay. These are the things
Right.
that would change that to say, you have to talk to each other, and you have to make a decision to buy it.
I think I'm coming from this from a, not a fire or even a first responder, I'm coming from a core finance. If you chose a radio, and you chose a different radio, and you're telling me this is the best buy for the town, and you're telling me this is the best buy for the town, and I'm looking at it as from the Board of Finance going, one of you's wrong.
that's why we're sitting here.
Right,
Yeah, that's
and
why
but
we're
from the
sitting
Board of
here.
Finance perspective, you get to tell them how much they can spend to do the job, not how to spend the funds, that's where
Right, but
it gets a little
I
hazy.
want, when somebody tells me this is the reason we're buying these, is this is the very best, and this guy's saying this is the very cheapest, well, I don't want the very cheapest, and I don't want the, you know, I do want the very best for the cost that's, you know, economic, and I want to make sure everybody's using the same criteria to make their decisions, and I don't see that happening. I mean, on these small things.
Can we agree then on this list and start working on that, linking
Sure.
off ones that are totally unacceptable?
Yep.
Start narrowing down
So
what we
Tom,
agree on and what we
do
don't.
you mind if I just insert something that he asked for before we go to that?
Please.
So, but it doesn't change that. So you had asked about if people had ruminated, and I wasn't at the last meeting, but I have been thinking about this the 4 weeks since the meeting I was at last, and after I read the meetings from the minutes from the last meeting. And my thoughts are that we've spent 2 months sharing opinions and some facts. That's important. However, we can't make these big decisions that have such a potential impact on just the opinions and some facts. We also, you can get that to stop. We've also got to look at what data is available to make the decision and what factual information, full facts. And I think, you know, that's the study part of this, which I've advocated for since we set the original goal or the original mission, is that we do studying of some of the stuff that's available. And that might help us. I think we need to get going in that process, and it goes exactly to what Tom was saying. If we start talking about possible solutions, we have to figure out why those solutions are good or bad, or how they might get mixed. Or if we do a good job of studying what we need to do here, we may come up with solution 7 or 8, and then discover that that's the better, you know, the best solution. But I think whatever we're gonna present, if we're gonna give a reasonable result, whatever it looks like, to the members and to the town, we've gotta actually get to talking about, you know, I think we've done a good job with opinions and some facts, but we've gotta get talking to about all the data stuff, the stuff we've talked about a little bit, like we've gotta look in a organized manner at the financial stuff. We've gotta look at response areas, the calls, where are the calls in town, you know, are we doing the right thing, do we have equipment distributed the right way? Maybe that leads us to say, we need 4 fire stations or 2 fire stations. And maybe the stations are not the most important thing out of this, but that may help inform the decision of how the department is administered and structured. Or maybe we get into a conversation where we realize there's a regionalization opportunity, and then maybe it's a conversation, you know, maybe that leads us to say we really need to approach Ashford. Or maybe we talk about you guys providing ambulance service to Union, and maybe there's a value to that. Or, you know, so maybe that's regionalization. I don't know. I think we need to talk about those things so that when we 12 months from now, when we're putting forth suggestions, and we've eliminated maybe all but 2 of these solutions, or whatever it is, we've got something to back it up. And we all learn something in it too. That's my feeling. So I think we've got to get to that stuff, and that will help us. And it doesn't mean we can't talk about the solutions right now, but we've got to understand why we won't like something or not like something in more depth than we have so far. That's my feeling.
I agree with you, so one of the things I was thinking of is that we need more documentation to support our opinions, something
So
other
let's-
than,
So maybe for next steps, when we leave this meeting, we have a list of things we need, right? And then we'll bring them to the next meeting. Or try to.
What documentation you need depends on what it
What-
is you're going to be speaking of.
Right.
So, or looking at. If you want to look at the studies that are out there, I think this group had asked for those, and you had also given a copy of
Yeah, we've got all
those. Is
of
that
them.
something you want to start and looking at those and thinking?
Well, I think the right management tool is not to look at solutions analysis. We should be looking at need analysis. Decide what defines the need, how do we study what that is, how do we get the right information, because that'll drive us to solutions. If we do solutions analysis, we keep talking about what we like or don't like about particular solutions, and we may not create a new solution. And we may not address the need, right? I mean, we're all really here because we're trying to serve the town and solve a need.
that makes sense to you? Okay.
So I can
Oh, go
just
ahead.
comment, and I respect Mike greatly. I get what he's saying, but I think all the people at the table here have had enough years and experience to really have a handle on what the needs are, and we talked about the needs, and I get what you're saying, but
Except we don't all agree on it, and we should be able to agree on it. We should get the facts, because if the facts say there's 277 calls at one place, then we know it's a fact. If Tom thinks there's 250 and Alex thinks there's one, you know, we.
I think no matter how or what direction we go, we're not all going to agree on what the needs are.
No, but at least as we get as much of the facts as possible, there's less disagreements. That's my feeling. And there's nothing to hide in the facts. I mean, the facts are the facts. No one's trying to hide anything.
It almost sounds to me, that, correct me if I'm wrong, like doing a new study.
No, I'm saying, I mean, I think that's what this committee is here for. It's not that hard to figure out like where our calls are and what our call volume is. I mean, Willington Hill did a really simple, maybe 85% accurate version of that during the conversations about the 25 Old Farms property. We placed dots on a map where the calls were. I probably have a copy here somewhere.
And the CAD.
And we can get much more accurate information. Stuart can get it out of the CAD. But I mean, we can do simple things like this, and this is where the calls are in town, and then we can all look at it and say, huh, okay, that doesn't tell us anything. That doesn't change anything. Okay, good enough. But if we look at it and say, okay, that tells us something about where we're providing services, maybe that helps us. I don't know, that's just,
so you want to do a plan for the town of Wilmington?
I want to plan, if we're talking about possibly a big transition, I want to plan that transition. I want to look at the need, define it, measure it.
All right, if we don't narrow, I think it would be better to narrow down a focus rather than going through 12 months of what you're talking about and then still.
I get what you're going for, I just think it's reverse engineering.
I agree. I don't want to interrupt you, Tom.
Oh, please do.
I agree with, we need the facts, but I think that we need to narrow down what those facts that we're looking at for. I think we need to have an idea of, there's such a broad area that we could be looking for. I think we need to narrow that part down.
There's a couple objects that I perceive to be almost immovable, that we can study and look at the facts all we want, but these things still aren't going to change. And it's the big ones that we've talked about. So we kind of need to know if there's, I personally would like to know if there's any give with anybody to compromise. Or do you think the compromise factor might bubble forth if we?
My hope is if we as a committee do a good job of looking at the things that we feel matter, we're gonna come up with something that we not only can defend as an answer, but that we feel, we can defend it not only factually, but we can defend it because we feel like we did the right thing to get to that answer. And I understand what you're saying, if we eliminate a couple of these, we narrow our focus, we just have to keep in mind, we may come back to one of them as we get through
Like
this
if-
process over
if
the
there's
next few months.
5 people that say, change nothing. Well, okay, then what's the point?
Yeah, but if we decide that here tonight, we haven't done our job, we've kind of wasted all our time if we say, well, yeah, we don't want to do anything, and here's our reason why, because we don't.
I just see, just discussion, and I'm trying to understand totally what you're saying. It's just that a lot of time, as you know, has been invested in lots of studies and lots of stuff in the past. And here we are, and some of the stuff has improved. So I think I agree with Alex, and maybe we could talk about what your list and try to ping off, I don't know, to try to narrow it
Can
down.
I back up just one step? And I apologize.
And I'll be quiet.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't.
All right. Can you give me a brief, brief definition in your visions between a paid administrator and a fire commissioner, what each one means and how they differ?
Yeah, very easily. I see a paid administrator as essentially, based on what was sent out about, I think it was the Coventry job posting,
Yes.
that a lot of the problems that maybe the town is looking to resolve, and some of us probably are too, about the bringing everything to one sort of point of communication or contact or decision-making, would be having a person who's inserted in between the town and the departments. I don't know exactly what that structure looks like, but they're given some sort of parameters or job description. And that person's job, and it may be combined with other things. I had thoughts about, do we combine it with an emergency manager or a fire marshal or any other types of things?
That's what Coventry did, is they combined
Right.
it with.
And that paid administrator, a big part of their job is to then pull together whatever resources belong to the fighting fires and EMS and everything else, and fund them and administer them or whatever. And the only difference between that and the fire commission is the fire commission is essentially a political organization created through, either elections or appointments that is doing a similar role. May not be the same exact job description.
That's
Well,
what.
and there's no,
So the main difference.
potentially no
between fi-
cost here.
Right,
A lot of cost here.
Right,
Right.
that was my,
And they
my
all
question,
have
but
the positives and
They both have
negatives.
the same mission, one's a single person that's paid, and one's is.
Is a group of
multiple
people who are
people
probably not
who are
paid.
Probably not paid.
Yeah, and they have a lot of very different things around them and how they're put together, and things, pluses and minuses for each of them. It was just for the sake
Okay,
of
so
conversation.
yeah, that.
Personally, I hate the fire commission idea, but I could be convinced otherwise, maybe,
So,
See, we're
That's-
opposite on that. I'd rather have the fire commission over a
than the
paid.
paid administrator. Right, which is why we gotta,
we gotta think about the.
I would
differences.
hope we would leave this process agreeable.
And,
We may not.
We may not.
and I thought that's where you were going with this, I just wanted to make sure that I was clarified in my own mind that that's what you were doing. The other thing that I wanted to back up a little bit on is when I was talking about you as a chief and Tom as a chief. Did Tom come to you about buying this property and say, hey, what do you think? How does this fit into your plan?
I found out the same morning that the board of selectmen.
Okay,
The board.
and did Alex come to you and say, hey, we're looking at an addition, what do you think we should put in the addition? See, those are big issues that I think we need some kind of formal communication. You see what I'm saying?
That's gonna get you here, so that's gonna have to be
That's-
some
that's gonna be-
formal.
That, either that, I think that
Or
could be in
It could be
all
anything
six
from
of,
2 through 6.
2 through 6 would fix that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a clear directive from the town saying, you have to do this in order to get.
Right, but the only
Right.
one of those that doesn't solve that is one.
Right.
So for a couple of months now, you've been meeting, and I think what I've heard from the table and people who come to speak is our biggest issue is paid versus volunteer. Do you, and I ask this to all the members, a combined paid and volunteer. That seems to be the biggest concern, correct? How
Well,
you could put those two
Let's not word
together,
it that way, paid versus volunteer, it's.
paid and volunteer.
What the paid.
So
and
do you
volunteer
think that
was.
if that is something that you could really focus on, that you could see some combination of a department? If this, that is the big concern between your departments and your members, if that issue could be worked out, do you think that we'd be away from change nothing and find some kind of combination department?
You know what?
'Cause that's what I have heard for a couple of months as the biggest concern. So I
Right.
think that needs to be
I
the
think-
elephant in the room that's addressed.
Do you, I see that could be addressed under any one of the 2 through 6, on how to fix it, how to make sure that doesn't interfere.
But I think until you talk about it, like really, really dig in and talk about it, you're gonna go around in circles about the rest of it. That
If we
seems
can't
to be
figure
the
that-
one thing we
If we can't
hear.
figure that one problem out, we're not gonna figure anything
Well, that's what I've been
Yes.
saying all along.
That's-
That's what I've been
So-
saying from day one.
So Erica, my opinion on answering that question, and I'm just one voice, and some people will like me for this and some will hate me for this. I think the solution in the long run is one department. I think all of this, the fact that we're sitting here tonight, all of this pain in the ass stuff, is because we have 2 groups, both incredibly well-meaning and both doing a good job, but we have this organizational problem.
I think you're just
And-
doing the same job in 2 different ways. I'm encouraged that the 2 of you came together to come to the town to do this. But to me, we're gonna go around in circles for months
Yeah.
if you don't address the problem that we heard from both this side of the table and this side of the table.
Right, so I think the
We don't just, like Tom said,
solution.
we gotta talk about it.
I think the solution is one department. I think that's better than the paid administrator or the fire commission. And I think that, I agree that the challenge is finding a way to structure it so it's sellable to all the people who have to agree to it and buy into it. And that we do it in a way that doesn't create a negative impact on the services that we're providing, on the resources we have. You know, that it doesn't scare away volunteers, or that it doesn't put more burden on the paid people, and then we have to put more paid people on.
So to what you're saying about let's get some facts to move forward, what Tom's saying is let's narrow down, let's focus the facts on how to deal with paid and volunteer.
Right, so I mean, to go with what you're saying, Tom, I mean, in my mind, we take one off already, now we're down to 5. We're already,
I don't think anybody would acknowledge that 1 is a good, I don't think anybody would say.
no, for
"Let's-
discussion, it
let's
should
go
be,
with 1."
for discussion, it should be on the board, that's all.
If so, I'll log up the building and go home. You can
It
all
may
be
be
like,
what we end
this
up
is,
with,
you know, I
but
look at
don't
this
think
as
anybody-
worst case scenario, and right back where we are.
So,
And
I
you-
agree.
For 14 months, you couldn't come to anything and say go back.
Unfortunately,
Agree,
in politics, that's
maybe
where
not,
you
but
all
it's not
end
what
up.
anybody wants, we want to see it fixed, we want to see the solution.
But
Getting back to what Mike
Yeah,
said
you gotta
earlier,
focus
if
on,
we're gonna, even if we do focus on that problem, and I agree with you that it is our biggest hurdle in this issue, we need to find out what other people have done, because there is no need to reinvent the wheel here.
absolutely.
I sent this article out from October of '96 in Stamford, exactly the same problem. I've talked to the police chief in Coventry, who is a little removed from the situation, and I'm sure he doesn't have the same emotional problems there, but they have exactly the same problem, and they have not solved it by combining their departments. They've got more like Solution 4 going in Coventry. All their departments are still individual departments for association reasons, and
And they just added another one.
they did, and, yeah,
During the
they've
beginning
got,
stages, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the beginning stages of remodeling the whole picture.
right, they think they're going to 5, according to the police chief. They think they're going to 5, but what they're indeed
Well, they
They
going
already did
They
that.
already have
They
this,
already
I
did
know
that.
this.
Yeah, that's what they think they are. That's
Oh,
what,
no,
I have it.
they have one, but what's actually happening is more like 4. They got 5 and 4 both going.
Well, it's even worse. They
It's
have
even, yeah.
two departments, actually 3 departments going on there.
Right,
They have
The town's
Stone
still gonna be-
North Coventry.
and they still don't talk to each
South
other.
Coventry's up there,
Right.
and now the ambulance corps, or whatever you wanna call
You
it.
know,
So let's
Yeah,
not
so
be
let's
common
not
trees,
do
what I'm
that.
hearing, let's not be
Yeah,
common
that's
trees.
not, so put 7 Coventry and put an X on it.
We,
So-
look, we narrowed it down, just like that to say.
But I don't think they were going into it with any less you know,
No, I don't think
decision
so.
to
But,
improve than we are.
but Peter, all
and
we've
we're just
heard from
finding out
people
the
here
problem.
and here is the same thing.
Right.
We have to start talking, we know some combination of this is what we're gonna end up with.
I want to find some place where it was
But let's
fixed.
focus the facts on
You're not going to.
in here.
This issue, no matter how, even with splitting it from ambulance to fire, and we're still going to have that issue where there's some separation.
Yeah.
And please, anybody in the audience at the table, if it was one chain of command, where you have one set of officers, and we operated the stations as they are today, would people leave? If it had just one chain of command?
You've already heard they would.
Yes.
Okay,
I've heard they would.
why?
Why? Look, I like to work with you guys. I show up, I have a lot of pride being in Station 4900. I started in Station 49 when I was just old enough to reach the switches on the trucks. You'd bring me in and I'd help you do truck checks. That's why I'm still in town of Willington. I show up, just like today. I showed up and to our medical call. Publicly, I can't talk about it, but showed up to the medical call, went swimmingly. I feel that I work very well with the paid members as a volunteer, as a separate station. We showed up, we got the job done, everything went well, and the call concluded. Very nice, very clean, it looked really good to the customer, which is people of the town. We all showed up, we did our job, and that was that. If we are going to a unified department where we have paid and volunteer staff, history has shown to me, and feel free to argue my
So,
point.
I just, this is.
Let us finish, I wanna hear it.
Yeah, no, please go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay, not a problem. For the record, I highly respect you, and.
Oh, no, and this is something I'm
Just
just
tell us
trying
what
to
goes
get.
wrong.
Yeah,
Tell us what goes
I
wrong.
need to know what goes wrong, because that's where I'm having an issue. We run as pretty much a combination department now. Yes, there is some split, but we go to every single call together. If that doesn't change, the only difference is, in all honesty, it depends on if Tom's the first one there or I'm there, in either district as to who's in command, or who's in charge of that call. Nothing, go ahead.
And no, I've said it before, it changes because then you have paid administrative, or paid people doing anything that needs to be done at any station, anywhere, anytime, taking any truck, you know, doing any chore, whatever it may be. So therefore, the volunteers are gonna be, they have their world now.
I understand
They
that.
have
but
their
if
world
there's-
that's not touched by anybody that they know they're responsible for.
Yeah, but if that's not changed as to where, I'll use the old Farm Road station. If the paid staff are where they are today, doing the responsibilities that they are today, and we leave the 49 station, a complete volunteer station that runs and operates as it is today, for responses, not as a, you know,
Administration.
the administration part of it being joined in the operations, as far as officers and stuff like that being joined. What changes?
So,
We're still going to all of the calls together
Yeah.
now.
no,
And I don't think anybody on this table, I know my guys are the same way of, we're not looking to run anybody out. We need the volunteers more than we need the paid staff.
What you said is kind of what I've been saying all along, you're separating the worlds, the paid and the volunteer world. You have to do that in some combination
In some
where,
combination, but
where
we can do
everybody's
it
happy.
with one chain of command and one set of administration.
I mean,
So we're,
All right, wait a minute, can I just take a second? I want to finish into the story, is because
Because it ended pretty good, I'm
I
not
got a
sure
real
that
good story
there's
so
something
far,
there.
but I haven't,
That's what I
and I was
Yeah, I wanna hear
going
the
down the
facts.
track,
Okay.
and I got, so
Everything
far,
went well,
everything's
and then-
good.
No,
And the
no,
train
no,
hasn't
it's
crashed
still
yet.
doing well.
Yeah.
We have very, very valid opinions. And again, this is my opinion. As I said 2 meetings or 3 meetings ago, if we came as one department, I will depart. Matter of fact, I will depart from the town entirely as a taxpayer. That's a discussion, it's a private discussion beyond that. But as far as coming together as a single station with paid volunteers, sadly, history has shown through other local departments that it eventually degrades into a, well, we have to pay people to do this job because the volunteers eventually burn out, say, no, I don't want to do this for various
Did
reasons.
something bad happen today at this medical call that would,
No,
that
let's
adversely affect, and
I was trying to say, leave it alone, it went
I think
fine.
that's
this
right.
one went fine, all right.
And his personal
Yes.
feeling is
My personal
that
opinion.
he would
Got it.
like just one department.
And if the command changed, do you think that would not go fine?
If it is specifically a volunteer command,
Yeah.
we could have, I would have that discussion, but if it was a paid command, absolutely not.
So,
Okay, so
Okay, that's different than
that's
paid.
different, and I very much appreciate your input on that.
Paid command is very different than the paid staff.
I'm trying
So-
to get some understanding.
if we can pinpoint a little bit, and Jeremy, I respect your opinions, and you're a real top-notch guy and member of Willington, so I really respect what you say. You see the you see the things that go on, and you see deficiencies. I know you do, because you know.
There are, well, yes, absolutely.
You see what we've discussed and some of the things that don't work so well, and why we're even here. You get all that. So, what do you think, because you volunteered your opinion, what do you think, and you heard the 6 things, what do you think would be acceptable? What do you think might be a good way forward for us to solve some of these problems and to address what you're saying, the concerns that you see at Willington Hill that you expressed? What do you think?
So, my personal opinion, and this is just my personal opinion.
That's what I'm
Jeremy
asking.
Chartier's 2 cents, that's it, nothing else. I like the idea of I hate to use the term fire commission, but perhaps a biannual meeting of chiefs to discuss, okay, we're coming up on our Scott bottles. Our Scott bottles come and due. Is it more advantageous to the town to refresh all our bottles right now? Or should we only refresh 13s or 49s? Is this a viable option? What should we do here? Do we need to start purchasing one specific brand of radio? Does it matter?
So Jeremy, you're talking about forcing the joint planning in this process? Because we're off and on with joint planning now. We have those conversations sometimes already.
We do, so.
But there's no direct.
And that's
connection.
what I
Get
brought up
together
at the
and
beginning
work
is-
together to
Right.
bring something to the town,
Get
that's the
the chief
difference.
officers together once or twice a year and just sit down and say, hey, we got these coming up, we got these coming up, this is coming up, this was asked. Sit down, maybe have an hour, talk about it, and make a concerted plan. That way you still preserve your diehard 49 members, your diehard 13 members. Everybody still has their happy places, everybody still shows up to calls, and the town gets a better deal. Because-
Jeremy, I had a very similar vision, except that instead of twice a year, I was thinking every 2 weeks or once a month.
That's.
Once a month maybe, every 2 weeks.
I know that's all it is. I know that's all it is,
Once before.
but it's 2 people that
But that's
that
still
would have
some
to meet.
sort of commission that's saying you have to meet, and from that meeting needs to come some product,
Right.
right? So without, it would have to be some form of
Instead of a fire
commission.
commission that's.
Otherwise, they're just meeting, and then when they get
that's elected by
tired
the
of it or it
town.
doesn't work.
From where I sit, I don't think we need somebody to tell us to meet. If
That's
we
it.
agree to do it,
You're gonna start, and then
then we'll do
eventually
it. I mean,
you'll,
if, like, again,
So-
what the topic
Yeah.
of conversation will be, I don't know, but.
So, Tom, I'm gonna throw this out there, and you may hate this. So we're coming into CIP and budget season. Let's sit down and do it together. CIP.
I've got it on 7.
the guy.
Didn't that happen with a CIP plan and they, CIP
Well-
picked it apart?
That's the only problem that I see.
That was
Is we did it before.
CIP
And
did
the
pick it
town-
apart, but CIP doesn't see this as coming, it saw it as coming from 2 different departments that kind of figured out stuff together,
But-
instead of.
Which is what we're
One-
supposed
No,
to do.
no, no.
What they're
How dare
doing-
you do what we told you to
But
do?
that
Instead
committee
of-
changes, it fluctuates in members, and the members change their opinion on what they think it should be.
And
So
what I'm-
therein lies, you do it, and then you don't, and then you do this, because that's what you're supposed to
Right.
be, and then these people want you to do something
So-
else, and then a new group sees
So if
it.
we do like Alex Sarah, like we've done in the past, the
Yeah.
CIP commission and the board of finance would have to accept it. And say, here's our plan as one.
Right.
So you
I-
They
can't,
can
Item
accept
number
your plan as
7.
one, and they can nix it
a
as
rule
one.
of theirs has to be they can't pick it apart.
The idea, and I was sitting on CIP when that happened, so I'm well aware of what happened there.
So
Is that-
Ding, ding, ding.
Somebody's gotta take accountability, like I said at the very beginning, so that would be me. But what I'm saying is that we were looking at two lists that had kind of gone like this instead of a master plan that said, you know, well, this is your top one, this is my top one.
So you got what
this is
you
the
asked
second, this
for,
is the
but you
second.
didn't like it.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem to be as integrated a plan rather than we've decided, you know, we have our list of priorities, you have your list of
But-
priorities, and then we're gonna prioritize the priorities and.
I still think it's a
There
matter
wasn't-
of,
didn't
it
seem to
works
be
in the
a-
beginning, and then when there's no, you don't have to.
So-
And then they disagree on when they come together with a plan, nobody's saying, you gotta do it together, we'd like you to.
Right.
Then that's how it splits apart. So there has to be some directive. What's the
So,
number
Mr.
7 on
Chairman,
it
I
now?
have a number 7, and this comes from this discussion. And that is, that some of these things we're talking about, like this forcing, assuring that these planning meetings happen, is we change the contracts between the town and the departments. And we make them contractual obligations. That saves us from having a ridiculous appointed political committee. It saves us from paying an administrator. It puts some of the planning into an obligation. So that's a solution, a potential solution.
Thank you.
That is a solution, that's a good one with, and possibly with somebody, an enforcer.
Well, that's why if it's in the contract, if the contract says that you will meet with the Board of Finance 6 months through the
Well,
fiscal
there's
year.
things in there now,
or-
Mike, that aren't being, you know, let's be honest. like-
Right, but enforcing a contract is another issue. Right. I'm just saying, you know, just like any of these things, enforcing them is a.
Yeah,
another
no,
issue.
that's what I'm saying.
Right.
You may need, I like your, I think your idea is another good idea, but you may need some tooth to it, you know, or somebody to watch it and make sure both sides are carrying it.
Right, so you have to, you have,
Her job, wouldn't it? Because it's a contract with the town, it's Eric gonna look.
or you may have to put in the
Right.
contract some of the things that happen if you don't follow the contract.
Right, so there's, and I think you've
Sure.
all seen a copy of the contract, and you can see that it says the town will do some things, but you all do them.
Right.
And it says you will do some things, and the town does them.
Right.
Or some things that just don't happen. So there's a lot of, the contract was made, and it seemed like fire services were good, and the financial portion of it seemed to be what has been followed through, but the rest of it, not so
Yeah,
much.
that's the thing,
Yeah,
because that's another fall through the cracks sort
that's
of a
right.
thing.
You can put it in, but it needs to be.
Right, follow up.
Somebody
Has to have
needs to be following it and making sure, so.
Well, it's on there for us to see if we can eliminate it, or like it.
Or this should be a short-term solution. This
There are
could be a
things-
short-term,
That could be too.
start
It could
with
be-
this
right,
while
we
you
could
look at
combine
the others
this
over the
with
next 14
something
months,
else.
say, hey,
Yep.
let's start with altering the contract and adding in things like, we'll present a combined CIP, we'll look at
Yep.
annual budget, operating budgets together. And go from there.
I'd also like to see some long-term planning, like the addition and the land purchase.
Right.
You know, there's no discussion between the two about, everything from which cell phone app are we gonna use for responding, all the way up to multi-million-dollar projects.
I don't think anybody disagrees with me.
Right.
On any-
All right.
But there's
and-
nothing in writing from the town that says they have to. So they can talk about it and then they don't. They
Right.
have to,
And I think
Agreed.
that we need to,
Yeah.
I was hoping that instead of altering the contract and forcing them, that they just want to do that.
But then that dissipates when they disagree.
But I was just
Right?
thinking about what Peter just said, I think that there's things that are that are not in the contract, like the annual report. We have to write one, I have to write one. We don't wanna do it, but people keep sending out a reminder, hey, your annual report's due, and we write.
Well, you have to do
Is that
it.
going out yet?
It's
Yeah.
both.
Yes.
Yes.
That's not an option, that's, you get money from the town, you gotta write a report to tell the town how you
Well,
spent the
again,
money.
so it's something like that, that if we put this together.
Right, that is actually in the contract.
Well,
So let's use a different,
let's use a different example.
let's use a different, that is, if you use town funds, you have to report on how they were spent.
Right, right. Again, so there's things that we need to be, they have to be done, that we may need some reminders and stuff, but we agree to do them, and we usually get them done. I think if we start without changing the contract, like Peter said, and agree to do
The
it.
one thing I'd hate to do is change the contract now, and then
Yeah,
in 6 months, 7 months, we come up with a different solution as to how
Right.
we want to do something, and that has to be done again.
and that's why I say.
I would
We
think
need to
we could
put it in
make a
stone.
simple addendum to the
You
could
contract
put
for a
an
short
addendum
term.
to the contract.
Make a short-term addendum to the
There's
contract
language in
with
the
a circuit
contract
breaker to break you out of it.
that there's a certain number of days, I believe it is 180 days. Anyone could get out of the town or either department or a mutually agreed upon timeframe. So if the three parties came together and said, look, we're gonna change this in 30 days, let's work on it, way done. So there are ways to alter that. There may, with changes that have happened just with land purchases, there's a need to alter the contract. So there may be a need to open that up and look at it anyway. If there are things you want to put in there short term, that there are ways. No one, that contract was written so that no one was locked into it for forever. Both the town and
I read the
the
whole
department.
thing, but, oh, thank God. I'm crooked, but not that crooked. All right.
Aren't you running for something?
That's a rough thumb,
That's
Mr.
for his life, yeah.
I'm like, yeah. All right. So,
So,
yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
If I may, since
You may.
I've already thrown my hat in the ring, apparently. I do hear a lot of the land purchase coming up, and I'd just like to remind people that no taxpayer money is going into it yet.
Yeah, until, but
when I
it's
talk about
it's
the
in the
contract,
system.
the contract spells out what
I'm
property.
not talking
yeah.
contract anymore.
But the
I'm just
contract is
talking-
just what's owned by it, so. That's the only reason.
It's enumerated in the contract, so we, yeah.
You were like the fifth person to
Yeah.
mention. You're in a line. The 25 Old Farm Road purchase was purchased with private funding,
Mhm.
with no, it has yet to receive any funding from the town people,
Mhm.
okay? So effectively, the association has bought this in good faith to basically help us provide better services to the town. So, let's not use that as a punching bag.
No, I'm not,
That's what it sounds like.
please don't think I'm using it as a punching bag. What I'm saying is that there's future plans for fire service being made by Station 49.
And 13.
By both.
Right.
Right, and by 13, and I mentioned their addition as well. That's why I'm saying, these are both major purchases made by the association that are being made in good faith for the betterment of fire service to the town of Willington. Have I said anything anybody's disagreed with yet? But this plan has not been discussed with this department, and this plan has not been discussed with this department, and probably we should be having some kind of coordination about the planning of Willington's fire service over it, from the, what's the current term, the 30,000 foot level. So that the people of the town of Willington who are paying for fire service in a broad umbrella are making sure they're getting their best
And
service
that's
for their
exactly what
dollar.
I was talking about before.
Right,
That's what.
so what we need is that 30,000 foot kind of view to make sure that the whole plan is coming together.
Maybe
Now,
this was from 30,000 feet,
that's probably a little higher.
50,000?
Right, so the departments are looking at what is in the best interest
This is
of their
them.
departments
Right.
moving forward. And through CIP and Board of Finance, the town is looking at what's best for
For the
them.
town.
At some point, if they all come together,
Right.
is what I'm hearing you say, then we're all again the same thing. What I don't think anyone here will disagree with is removing firehouses. And I've heard that come up at different places. People worry about a station remaining here, whether you build a new one across the street on your own through town funds or remain at 24 Old Farms Road. I don't think anyone, even though studies question that a fire station house needs to be at that location and at the River Road location for insurance purposes and for response time, right? So sometimes that gets up, people looked at, purchasing a new piece of land and worry that then they're not gonna have a firehouse there. I don't think that's a realistic opinion of anyone who's here and knows why we have stations that house trucks in different areas of town. That's not going to change.
I think
I
we're very founding of
wouldn't,
49.
in my own mind, I wouldn't say that 100%, I'd say
Right.
95%.
It may move from here to, over here or in this area, but in this vicinity of town, there needs to be something. And in this vicinity of town, there needs to be something.
Yes, yeah.
So-
I mean, even just looking at the really quickly done thing that we did, which was January 1st to May 15th of this year, you can see how the calls are spread out. And if you look at the areas that have multiple calls, they do kind of line up fairly closely with where the stations are. Again, maybe not exactly perfect,
In the short
but
vicinity.
right, they're within reason.
Okay, given a small silence here. We've already covered number 7 rather extensively. I think that what we want to do for our SWOT analysis additions is to take some of these ideas here and then digest them and bring them back the next time for our plot. And I think that covers step 9 too.
Is there a place where we can work with a big dry erase board? So that we could I mean, what I'm imagining is us drawing out a grid and putting these possible solutions on one side and putting maybe the items from the SWOT analysis on another side and trying to create check marks where they
Yeah, we're-
either are
We're
positive
not
or
gonna be in the
negative.
thing, we'll be up here downstairs, so something movable. But it can
Do
go.
we still have a dry erase board in the coat closet, in the chair closet downstairs?
Yeah, I think we have just a board.
Yeah, a roll away
I
board.
don't think it's, I don't think it's rolling board anymore, it's just a board.
Yeah, I think the roll.
The roll,
Part, it's a part.
Roll away.
roll away.
Somebody had a new skateboard.
Yeah, we could
I
say
think
If
the
you-
road got
if you-
beat up for so long.
If you can bring it aboard, then we can move from either up here or downstairs.
Right.
We're just in different places depending on where.
I know at Station 13 we have a command board that's dry erase, but it's kind of not big enough.
Yeah. All right, so we'll try to bring something to the next meeting that's
Oh,
big
that's
enough to,
And
Are you gonna bring the markers or do you need to get you some supplies?
Well, we'll have to have a meeting on that. No, Why don't you make it easy, if you can get some. We're not sure if we have them, how many, what colors.
I'm sure the caps haven't been left off,
Right.
not dry.
No, yeah, no.
People just put them in their pockets.
Today.
Okay, so now we get down to number 11, which I put down as chairman's minute. But what I'm going to do during my minute is add to my list of things that I think are true. And please.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
I feel like there was something early on in the meeting that you said about progress steps, about things for next. You had addressed something in the conversation to something when we got to progress steps, we would want to put that as, or,
I don't remember, that's why I'm moving on.
okay?
Down.
Oh,
Oh, gold star for you.
yeah, that's 2 gold stars and a silver star for Alex this meeting. Yeah, I'd like to have people bring documentation to support their opinions. For instance, we heard a lot from mostly Station 49 personnel about mixing paid and volunteer, and there's got to be documentation out there, because none of this is new for anybody. This town is behind this changeover compared to the towns around us, and they're all having issues. What are their issues? Is there documentation on the issues, and any documentation on how they may have fixed any of this. Like, I've heard some things about Vernon, and then some, Tyler say that's not true about Vernon, but neither party brought any documentation saying this is what Vernon's doing. This is who said what Vernon's doing, this is how it's being done, et cetera, et cetera. So if you come in here with an idea, take a quick Google search, see if there's documentation, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, all right? I'm a true believer in that you can do it the hard way and think it out for yourself and do research, or you can crib off of somebody else's notes, somebody that's already done it, and save yourself some time, so please bring some documentation.
Chair, are you okay if I say a couple things?
Sure.
All right.
Your name, oh, I'm sorry, your name and...
Josh Strickland.
Are you from one of the
From Station
departments?
13, yes.
Station 13, all right.
Like Jeremy, I started when I was very young, 14 years old. Started volunteering. Worked my way up to a paid staff member. Still volunteered while I was a paid staff member as well. And then after I left as a paid member, I continued to volunteer. So I totally understand what Jeremy is saying, where you feel a sense of pride in what you do. That being said, I think that when you come from a combination paid staff volunteer department, things do work a little bit differently than how they would when it's a 100% volunteer department or 100% paid department. So I would employ the board to visit other communities around us that have combination departments. You look at Tom, reach out to Chief Lytell, see how they're doing with it. Reach out to Summers, Chief Roach, see how they're doing with it. I mean, I used to work in Summers. The volunteers are amazing there. We work hand in hand, very closely together, and there are tons of volunteers in Summers. Amounts that would probably triple or quadruple what both of us combined have here. How do they do it? How do they work with a paid department and also they have a volunteer? It's all together. So I would suggest or highly recommend that would be a good starting point if you're really focused on trying to combine into one department and not to use the consolidation word, but trying to make everything work together. Have a discussion with these departments around us to find out if it's working. It may not be working for them, but if it is, figure out what they did to begin with to do it. Because I can guarantee you that none of these departments around here had paid staff since their creation. They've all evolved over time. So I would just say reach out to them and see if they have any input on it as well. Because they're going to be good resources.
Exactly. And that's part of what I meant by documentation, is reach out to some of these people and document what they say. You can bring it in here. And you made me think of another thing that I've been mulling over in my head. Part of the value of what you bring as you get in return for your volunteer service is a feeling of accomplishment and necessity. I took martial arts for a lot of years, and I know I don't appear that way, but we had a bunch of volunteer instructors, and you had to go through extensive training to be a volunteer instructor. And one day, the owner of the dojo came out and said, "We want you to come and volunteer, but if you don't show up, we'll be fine without you." The next month, all the volunteers disappeared, because if you're not necessary, and you're told you're not necessary at any point, there's no reason to show up.
That's what I would say.
And that's,
But I don't think
that's
that's
what
ever
they
been
call a
said.
street corner.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be said out loud.
It
and
needs to be, the opposite needs to be said out
The
loud.
opposite needs to be said out loud, but it takes communication is 10% words, 90% body language and actions. And so if the paid person on the scene looks at the guy sideways and goes, "Oh, you're valuable here, you're helping out," the message we're fine without you is much more, it comes through much clearer. So I think that's a lot of where problems come in. And I talked to my karate instructor about that, and he goes, "Yeah, that was one of the biggest errors he's ever made in his career." So
But I think with that, and working in a combination department that has volunteers, it's different when you're talking about two separate organizations that deal with each other on a day-to-day basis versus one organization where there are two sets of individuals. There's paid staff, career staff that are there during whatever hours, and the volunteers, which are not, sometimes not supplemented, but they're actually doing more work than the paid staff are doing. I think it's a little bit different of an issue with the feeling of not being needed. Because I can tell you that there have been a ton of calls, especially in this town, where it's been myself and my partner who were paid staff, and I have needed help, and I don't have help. And you know, that feeling is way worse than not feeling needed. The feeling of actually needing some help and not getting it.
Believe me.
So, Mr. Chairman, on this topic and echoing Mr. Strickland's remarks, if we look to some of these other towns for examples, there's more than one chief and more than one sort of county knowledgeable person on this group. It's possible we're going to have 2 or 3 people from this group contacting the same people, asking the same question. Would it be better if the communication came through you? You got a contact information list from Stewart or Tyler or whatever through the county contact list, and maybe Tom's got the list handy, whatever. You got a list and you reached out to whichever those departments are, instead of me talking to Mansfield's chief.
You know what would be awesome is if you send me a list of people you think should be contacted, and you send me a list of people that
There you
should
go.
be contacted. I consolidate a list, and then instead of contacting those people myself, maybe we could assign them the next meeting.
That's
That's
fine too.
Yes.
One thing I'll throw into that is, we can kind of count on you as a less biased opinion,
Yeah.
because you're not a member of either. So if you have one person from one station talk to this guy, one station to this guy, they
Right.
they may not twist things, but interpret it differently.
How about the chairman contact each of these departments and invite their representative, preferably the chief,
Everyone
to
can
come
hear
to the
them.
meeting. Not all of them at once, but,
And
Right.
let them know the topic, please.
yeah.
All right.
So they're ready.
Yes.
I think we should just let them come in cold.
There's
and
no
back to it.
interpretation.
The
All right.
first go around with this,
Yeah.
Chief Kelly was invited. Chief Kelly came, and he told the truth. It wasn't pretty,
Yeah.
but.
Well-
Gotta be careful what you wish for. But
Chief, where's Chief Kelly from?
Vernon,
He's cemetery.
yeah,
All right.
Well, he was not at the time.
They tracked him out.
That's why
I've talked to Chief Rayola extensively, and I think we could probably get so.
yeah, he used to live in Willington.
Yeah, now he's building a new house in Mansfield. Getting remarried.
He's already ready.
He's already
That part's
married?
done, yeah.
Oh, that was quick. That was a big diamond. You see it?
Okay, let's stay on topic.
Sorry.
Moving on.
We digress.
Our next meeting is the same night as Trunk or Treat.
Right, so I sent a communication to all of you.
So can
We move it a month, and we'll skip the next meeting and
skip
then.
the next meeting until,
So, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Just cancel, you just put out an agenda that says cancel for October 23rd.
All right, thank you.
That will give time,
That
that'll
was
That's it.
the administrative.
give
step.
time for our guests to give plenty of notice for our
Yes.
guests to show up.
Excellent. All right.
I wouldn't have them all come down at the same meeting.
No, no.
All of them,
No.
maybe 2 of them, get a couple of them here.
We'll see what we
Let's stretch this until January.
Sure. All right.
Let's-
Yeah.
How many suggestions each would you like to see, Mr. Chairman?
If you
You
could
don't wanna
give me
see 20
four
from each of
four
us?
apiece,
Four.
4 or 5. Yeah.
Am I about the same one?
And you may have the same one as Mansfield.
What's that?
Vernon Powell covers Mansfield.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that's a note of commentary, is that what
Well, I mean, we could know what's going wrong.
And if you have the same 5, that makes my list a lot shorter. All right, so moving on to things that I think are true. I think there needs to be a formal communication conduit between the 2 departments, and we've discussed that endlessly at this meeting, so I still think that's true. How that happens is a different story. And I've already talked about how I think the leadership is consisting of inspiring those under your command and taking care of those people. And that I think we need a higher view, the 30,000-foot view of planning, to make sure that your addition has the stuff they need and their land is into your, is consistent with your plan, and that we all get the same, know who's responding and that kind of thing. So we need a continuity. The next thing I think is true is that firefighters directing traffic should wear safety vests. And the reason I added that was because I witnessed an accident and Ashford, nobody here, Ashford Volunteer Fire Department, we're all standing in the street in blue t-shirts directing traffic.
And all of our people are communicated.
Yeah, that's not good.
We're pretty good about
It's
that.
after a hair coat.
We're pretty good about that.
Something that reflects there's yellow or is opposite, the same color as the pavement, because I thought I was gonna sit there and watch the firefighter.
No, we have the ANSI, we don't have the, maybe it should be opposite the pavement, we have the actual ANSI.
That's even one step more than I was hoping.
And they use it.
We've exceeded your expectations.
You exceeded my expectations.
Look at that.
I need to go to more of your accidents.
Well, how do you say
Not
that?
be in one.
Here's your application.
Oh, you jumped first, clever.
I had long considered that, but, I have an old nature that would probably murder me for going to this.
We'll even put police at the end of your time.
Okay, yeah,
Fire, police, fire.
that way I can direct traffic in the right.
Invest, yes, invest.
I have my own, I have several, I carry them in the car now, so I can give them the car. And, I had some questions about mutual aid that I don't understand it, and I don't know. I was talking to some volunteer firefighters from departments as far away as Putnam, and there was something about getting paid for these major incidents, and like, I was talking to a guy from North Windham, volunteer fire department, when they had a train flip over. He was out there, and there was some payment from the insurance companies or something. I didn't even know this stuff existed. So, those will be questions that
Well,
come
in the North
up.
Wyndham incident, they got about 2 cents on the dollar when they tried to collect.
Right.
Yeah,
They got almost nothing.
Yeah, because we had looked into it and it made no, we were there
Oh.
for 2 days.
and the other question I had on that, we have a foam truck?
Home trailer.
Trailer? Is that toxic foam that when it goes into our
Yes.
rivers and streams, we're all poisoned?
Yes.
And why does Wyndham have one? Is it, why does Willington have one? Is that for like, highway fires, the tanker?
So it belongs to the state of Connecticut, not Willington.
Right,
They maintain it.
Yep.
Provide the foam for it if and when we use it. And they were trying to cover northeast Connecticut.
okay,
So specifically along the interstate highway whenever possible. And they approached us in 2006, I believe, and asked us if we were willing to host it. So once or twice a year, we get called to go out somewhere, but it's obviously available in our area as well. There are plans very soon to replace all that foam, including properly disposing of the stuff that's there and putting the newfangled stuff in that's.
that won't poison our wells?
I think you have to take it to the Farmington River to dump it out.
Mandatory.
Yeah, and it goes into the Farmington River.
Stu, didn't we take that to the B-52?
Yes.
Yes,
B-17.
17,
B-52s is a band.
and a much bigger airplane.
Oh, it's a plane?
Yes.
Um,
Say air B-17, World War II.
I knew that.
Except the
I read about
B-52
that
is still being flown. All right,
That's not
B-17.
anymore.
B-17 is not being flown anymore, it's not B-17. All right, so I'm looking at you.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Looking for a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time and effort.
You're hoping to.
No, I'm supposed to make my way through drinks, I think I'm gonna go.